Amanda Watson wandered down the dark, deserted alley. She was shivering in the jean jacket, halter top, and mini skirt she was sporting. She knew she should stop somewhere and pull some warmer clothes out of the bag she was carrying, but she just kept moving. The heels of her boots clicked on the pavement as the wind went right through her skirt. She didn't acknowledge any of this, though. She was lost in her own thoughts. This day had started out so fantastically. She made some good tips and thought her life couldn't get any better. Then everything just went downhill from there. Halfway through her shift, the boss pulled her into his cubicle. The fat slob had been hitting on her for 6 months, but she kept turning him away. Today he gave her an ultimatum to sleep with him or find another job, so she had quit. When she got home, she was in tears and needed some solace from her boyfriend. She didn't expect to find him with the next-door neighbor in her bedroom. He had apologized profusely, but she had just filled a bag with some clothes and left not caring where she ended up. Now here she was, 2 states over, in the middle of the night, walking down a deserted street. Her car had run out of gas 2 miles down the road, so she had started walking. She hadn't seen another car in over an hour and was looking for a place to crash for the night when she saw the headlights come up behind her. Marty Monroe wasn't the kind of guy to be driving down dark streets in the middle of the night, and he definitely wasn't the type to pick up strangers. His Mercedes had the radio blasting some rock song and the heat was on full blast. He was bouncing around to the music and almost missed the woman standing on the side of the highway. He had been driving for 2 days trying to get home to Louisiana for his mother's birthday party this weekend. He had been to a sales meeting in Seattle. He had decided that instead of flying, he would drive across the country. It would be picturesque. His designer jeans and high-class t-shirt cost more than what Amanda made in a month. Marty was what you could call a multi-millionaire. He had started a software company in his basement 5 years ago and now had companies all over the planet. He had dumped his last girlfriend 6 months ago when she started pressuring him about marriage and hadn't had a decent woman since. When Denise asked him for the 100th time why he wouldn't marry her, he had looked at her coldly. "Denise, I'm 29 years old. I'm too young to settle down, and I sure don't want a bunch of rugrats messing up my reputation." She had moved out the next day. Marty didn't know what made him pull over to the side of the road. He was sure it wasn't the woman's looks. In fact, she had pretty plain, long brown hair and eyes. At least that's what he thought her eyes were. She wasn't fat, but she wasn't model material either. She was kind of right in the middle. He liked his women skinny with big breasts. This girl had a bit of a stomach on her, and her breasts didn't look that big. Something about her struck his eye, though, so he pulled the car over to the side of the path and stopped watching her in the rearview mirror. Amanda stared at the car for a minute, sure her eyes were deceiving her. When it looked like the car wasn't going to go anywhere, she slowly walked up to it. She stopped as the passenger window was rolled down, then she leaned down, leaning on the door. "Where are you going, honey?" a deep southern voice asked in the darkness. She could barely see the driver, but the voice sent shivers through her body. "Anywhere I can get to, pretty much," she replied in her soft voice. "My car broke down a couple miles back." There was silence in the car for a minute, then the voice spoke again. "You want me to take you to get gas?" Amanda chuckled. "Wouldn't do me any good, no money." Again there was silence, then suddenly the door opened. "Get in, honey. It's too cold to be outside." Amanda hesitated for about 2 seconds, then slipped into the car. She closed the door, then turned to face the driver and was caught by a pair of startling blue eyes. The eyes seemed to bore into hers. When they moved down over her body, she tore hers from his. He had a nice face with a goatee and mustache. His long fingers held the steering wheel loosely. "I'm headed for Louisiana. You're welcome to come along for the ride," the deep voice said. Amanda shrugged, leaning closer to the heater. What the hell? Ain't got anywhere else to be. She knew she was somewhere in Nevada and figured it would take them 3 days to get to Louisiana. Maybe she could find another job as a dancer down there and start over. Marty watched her for another minute. He watched her lean close to the heater, then curl up against the door and close her eyes. After a couple of minutes, he heard her even breathing and knew she slept. He tore his eyes from her as he pulled back onto the empty road. He knew he had at least a couple more hours before he needed to find a hotel and sleep for a while. He wondered who this girl was and what she was doing out here all alone. He also was trying to figure out why he got excited the minute she got into the car and hadn't gone back down. He reached down, adjusting his pants. Finally, he just gave up and sighed. Somehow he had a feeling it was going to be a long night. Amanda came awake with a start and looked around her. It took her a minute to remember what had happened. Joshua had cheated on her, she lost her job, and now she was in the middle of nowhere with some guy she didn't know. She turned to look at him through sleep-filled eyes. Marty took his hand off her shoulder. He had shaken her to wake her up. "We're stopped for the night. You might be more comfortable in a real bed." He nodded out the window. Amanda looked out the window and saw a motel sign flashing in the darkness. She nodded, opened the car door. She climbed out, making sure to grab her purse and bag off the floor. Marty watched her for a minute, then climbed out of the car and moved over to room number 3. "I got a room with 2 double beds," he said casually over his shoulder as he unlocked the door. "That's fine," Amanda said, yawning as she followed him into the room. The room consisted of 2 double beds, a dresser with a TV sitting on top of it, and 2 end tables with lamps between the beds. She eyed the bed closest to the door, dropping her stuff on it. Then she turned around. The driver came in behind her carrying a duffel bag and dropped it on the other bed. Then he turned to look at her. "I'm Marty. Marty Monroe." She nodded. "Amanda." She didn't tell him her last name, and he didn't ask. Marty pulled off his t-shirt, showing a well-developed chest that Amanda couldn't help admire. Her hands itched to reach out and touch him. She clenched her fists at her sides. She tore her eyes from his body as he sat down and started pulling off his boots. She turned towards her bed, pulling a long silk nightie out of the bag. "I'm going to take a shower," she heard behind her. She nodded, afraid to turn around and look at his body again. Her breathing had quickened. She forced herself to relax and succeeded a bit when she heard the bathroom door close and the shower turn on. She stripped out of her clothes, pulling on the nightie. She threw her clothes she had been wearing in the duffel bag, buried them under the blankets, then climbed under, and within minutes was asleep. Amanda woke this time to someone kissing her and hands moving lovingly over her body. She moaned as she felt the strap of her nightgown slip down her shoulder. She lifted her hands to the head, running her fingers through the hair. Then she froze. Joshua's hair was rough, almost like sandpaper. The hair she was running her fingers through was baby fine. She pulled her hands back and screamed as she reached for the light. She flipped the switch on and stared into Marty's eyes. He had a sheepish look on his face. "Sorry. You looked so hot laying there, and when you seemed to accept my kisses, I couldn't help myself." He made no move to move away. It's okay," she said as her breathing slowed down. I... She didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. Marty's eyes searched hers for a minute, then he sighed. "I'm sorry," he said. He brushed over her chest once, then moved off the bed. Amanda felt a flicker of desire run through her body and gasped. She looked at him, wondering at her body's reaction to this stranger. When he moved to leave the bed, she panicked. "No, wait," she said, reaching out, wrapping her hand over his arm. Marty turned back to look at her. He didn't move to shake her off, but he didn't move closer either. He just looked into her eyes. I'm sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me tonight," she said as she shivered. Marty looked at her tenderly. He knew he couldn't leave her. He couldn't leave her in the hotel alone, and for some reason he couldn't leave her bed. He reached up, running a fingertip over her cheek. "Do you want me to sleep here tonight?" he asked softly. Amanda looked at him. She stuttered. She looked at her hand holding his arm and realized that she was afraid to be alone. "Yes, please." Marty searched her eyes, then nodded. She released his arm, moving over on the bed as he stripped down to his underwear. He turned off the light, then climbed into the bed beside her. He kept his body away from hers, but could still taste her on his tongue. He groaned. "Are you okay?" Amanda asked, laying beside him, but with her back to him. "Yeah, I'm fine," he said gruffly as he reached down, repositioning himself. He cleared his throat, then resting his arm above his head, closed his eyes. They lay there for a couple of minutes. She was on her side, facing away from him while he lay on his back, neither touching but yet at the same time feeling the heat coming from the other's body. They each knew in themselves that they were attracted to each other, but neither knew what to do about it. Marty didn't want to push her into something she didn't want, and Amanda had never touched a man first before. It was always after they made the first move. She moaned as she rolled over onto her back, her hair spilling out behind her. Marty glanced at her, then went back to watching the ceiling. Amanda didn't know what to do. She wanted Marty to touch her, but she was afraid she had somehow scared him away with her earlier outburst. What would a guy like him want with a girl like me? She thought to herself as she reached down her body, lifting the bottom of her nightgown. Marty knew he either had to touch her or get out of this bed soon or he would go crazy. He heard Amanda roll over yet again and did his best to ignore her. It was made even harder when her hand rested tentatively on his chest, and she said his name softly. Marty? She made it out to be like a question. He took a deep breath, let it out, then turned his head to look at her. Her eyes lit up in the moonlight, and he could see the heat in them. He knew then that she needed him just as much as he needed her. He let out a moan, rolling over onto his side, facing her. He slowly reached out, putting his hand lightly on her waist. He held it there for a moment as he looked into her eyes. When she didn't pull away, he wrapped his hand more firmly around her and pulled her slowly towards him. Amanda wasn't sure which she was more of, scared or excited. Scared because she had never done this kind of thing before, or excited because he was touching her. When their bodies were no more than a hair's breadth away, she slowly released the breath she had been holding. She reached up tentatively and placed her hand on his face. Marty, she said almost breathlessly before she darted out her tongue and licked at her dry lips. Marty watched Amanda's lips part as she spoke, and something in his chest tightened. Amanda, he whispered hoarsely, pulling her into his arms and pressing his lips to hers with a hunger he couldn't hold back. Amanda melted into the kiss, her arms wrapping around his neck as her body instinctively leaned closer. Her flowing gown shifted as she moved, the fabric brushing against him in a way that left his senses reeling. "Oh, Amanda," he murmured against her lips, his voice low and filled with emotion. He deepened the kiss, his hands running down her back, holding her tightly as if afraid to let go, her warmth, her presence. It consumed him, leaving him breathless. As their connection grew more intense, they moved together, as though caught in a moment outside of time. Their hearts raced in unison, the world around them disappearing until only the two of them remained, lost in the depths of their undeniable bond. When it was over, Marty held her close, his forehead resting against hers, both of them breathless and overcome with the intensity of the moment they had shared. Marty collapsed against her, his breath coming out in ragged gasps. "Oh, God." He looked at her, suddenly ashamed at his actions. "I'm so sorry." He reached up and gasped as he felt her cheek wet with tears. He pulled out of her quickly, then reached over, turning on the lamp. Amanda lay in the position he had left her. There were tears rolling down her cheeks, but she had a huge smile on her face. She reached out, cupping his face with her hand. "Don't apologize. I needed that. I really did." She sat up, cringing as pain shot through her tired muscles. Marty reached out and helped her sit up, then pulled her gently into his arms. "I don't know what got into me," he said softly as he kissed the side of her head. "It's never been like that before." Amanda looked at him in mock surprise. "You mean you don't usually pick up strange women you pick up on the side of the road in the middle of the night?" He chuckled, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "Yay. Well, that too. I meant, I'm usually not that rough. I'm usually a pretty romantic lover." He touched her lips tenderly with his. She moaned slightly, then rested her head against his chest. He lay back on the bed but kept her held tenderly in his arms. "It's okay," she said softly, trying to hide a yawn. "I liked it. I'm usually not into rough stuff, but for some reason with you tonight—" She lifted her head, looking at him in the light coming from the lamp. It seemed natural. He nodded as he looked at her. "I know what you mean. I mean no offense." He looked down at her naked body. He ran his hand lovingly down over her stomach. "You're not actually my type. I've always gone with needle-thin chicks." Amanda laughed, and he felt his heart swell with the sound. "Ah, I see. Toothpicks with a pair." She sighed as she rested against him. "Yay. I've seen plenty of those in my line of work." He ran his hand lazily over her stomach. "What line of work is that?" Now that they had gotten past the desire, he realized he wanted to know more about her. The thought terrified him. In his way of thinking, women were good for two things: relationships and fun time. He was afraid that Amanda, this mysterious stranger, would fit into both categories, and it scared him to death. Amanda lifted her head, looking at him with a small smile on her lips. "Would you believe I'm an exotic dancer?" He looked at her in surprise. She smiled. "I didn't think so." She rested her head back against his chest. "I know your type. You think the only women who can be an exotic dancer are ones who have a tight tummy, big breasts, and a tight little butt." He wanted to deny the accusation as it pricked at his pride, but as he lay there holding her in his arms, he realized that she was right. That was his idea of an exotic dancer. "Guess I need to get out more," he said with self-scorn. She just giggled and kissed his chest. She started to move out of his arms, but Marty tightened his grip on her. He was suddenly afraid that if she left his arms, he would never have her in them again. "Don't go," he said, suddenly panicking. She looked up into his eyes and saw the fear. She didn't understand where it came from. They didn't even know each other, but it was like he was afraid she would leave him or something. She reached up, touching his cheek. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly, "but I have to go to the bathroom." He chuckled as the tension left his body and he released his grip on her. "Hurry back." She nodded and slipped from the bed. Marty lay back on the bed, resting his hands behind his head as he watched her walk naked to the bathroom. When the door was closed, he turned off the light, then lay back, looking up at the ceiling and trying to figure out what had just happened. Marty knew nothing about the woman in the bathroom other than the fact that she was one hella hot. Just thinking about making love to her again made him smile in the darkness. "Okay, so I'm attracted to her. There's nothing wrong with that," he said quietly into the darkness. It was the other situation that he didn't understand and scared the hell out of him. He knew it was at least a 3-day drive to New Orleans where his mother lived. If she decided to go for the full ride, it would be 3 days of making love and spending time with her. "Is that what I want?" Again he asked the darkness, and his mind decided yes. He wanted to get to know this mysterious stranger. But why? Why was she so important to him all of a sudden? What was different about her from the other women he had been with? And most important of all, would this end in happiness or heartbreak? As he lay there in the darkness, he couldn't answer any of these questions. All he knew right now was the thought of her walking out of his life devastated him. As Amanda used the bathroom, she would have been surprised to know that her thoughts were pretty well equal with Marty's at that moment. The same thoughts that ran through his head were also running through hers. Who was this guy? Why did he affect her so strongly, both in her body and soul? It was obvious from his clothes and car that he was rich. He was richer than anyone in her acquaintance. She knew she didn't fit in his world, and she also knew that he didn't fit in hers. She finished her business, flushed the toilet, then stood looking in the mirror. She saw the same face looking back at her that she had seen every day for the 26 years of her life. "There's nothing special about me," she said to herself as she brushed her hair from her face. "What does he see in me? Does he want me for more than bed? For that matter, do I want to get into another relationship right now?" She thought about watching Joshua and Maria and felt a stab in her heart. She had been with Joshua Michaels for 3 years. He had picked her up at the bar where she was working in Portland one night. He had literally swept her off her feet when he carried her off the stage after her number. They had spent the next 3 days in bed screwing each other's brains out in so many different ways. Ways she didn't even know were possible. They would sleep for a while, eat, and then do it again. It had practically been love at first sight with Joshua, and the thought of him with another woman still hurt. She was pulled from her thoughts at a soft knock on the door. She wiped the tears from her eyes as she opened the door. Marty stood there in all his naked glory looking at her. His eyes were smoldering and she felt a burning desire. "Is everything okay?" he asked huskily. She swallowed, wetting her suddenly dry throat, and nodded. She squealed when he suddenly picked her up in his arms, carrying her to the bed. He lay her down gently, then moved over her. "What are you doing to me?" he asked as he took her again. "I can't seem to get enough of you." There was no urgency this time. It was just two bodies moving together in an ancient dance as old as time. "I don't know," she responded as she wrapped her legs tightly around his waist, lifting herself towards him. She rested her head back against the pillow and closed her eyes as she felt his lips moving slowly over her neck. "Love me, Marty," she purred. "Love me, I need to be loved so badly." Marty groaned, then kissed her deeply. "Oh God, baby, I need you so bad. I can't get enough of your body." He grasped her. Her breathing became ragged as her body moved furiously with his. This wasn't making love. Oh no. This was rough, and she needed it. As they both finished, he collapsed on top of her when it was over, breathing heavily. "Are you okay?" he asked, looking down into her eyes. She smiled sleepily. "Yeah, I'm fine." He kissed her softly, then rolled off of her, pulling her into his arms. He closed his eyes, drifting off into a dreamless sleep. They slept for a while, then woke up again full of desire for each other. This continued all night long. They would sleep for a couple of hours, then wake up to make love again. Finally, as the sun started to rise, they curled up in each other's arms and fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 2. Marty awoke to sunshine creeping through the shut curtains. He rolled over, touching the space beside him, only to feel nothing but air. He opened his eyes and sat up with a start. He looked around in a panic until he saw Amanda sitting cross-legged on the other side of the bed, looking at him as he slept. He sat up, resting back against the wall as he looked at her. She was beautiful this morning. Her brown hair hung in waves around her shoulders. Her amber eyes, now that he could tell they weren't brown, were open and looking at him in wonder. The hands which had held him so lovingly in the night were resting comfortably in her lap. "Good morning," she said in her soft voice. "Or should I say good afternoon?" Marty looked at her in surprise. "Afternoon?" She smiled. "Yeah, it's a little after 2. The manager called to ask if we were staying another night. I told him yes." She blushed. "You looked so peaceful I didn't want to bother you." Marty nodded. "That's fine." He knew the manager would just add the second night to the credit card he had used last night to pay for the room. He adjusted the blankets so they rested over his waist, then looked at her again. He couldn't figure out how last night he ever thought she was plain. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever laid his eyes on. "Come here," he said softly, holding his hand out to her. She giggled as she took his hand, letting him pull her to him. She straddled his legs and sat back on his lap, with her hands resting lightly on his chest. She looked into his eyes. There was no heat this morning, not like last night. Oh, the desire was still there, but it was more muted. It was like he just wanted to look at her, and he just looked at her for a minute. It was as if he wanted to memorize her body and face. He wanted to etch her in his memory and never let go. "You're beautiful," he said, running his fingers through her hair. Amanda blushed, lowering her face. "No, I'm not." Marty leaned forward so he was close to her as he lifted her face with his finger until she was looking into his eyes. "Yes, you are. You are very beautiful." Before she could protest, he brought his lips to hers, kissing her softly. "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever laid my eyes on." He chuckled. "And believe me, I have seen some beautiful women in my lifetime." Amanda looked into his eyes. She wanted to believe him. She had never been beautiful, and she didn't think she was now. No one had ever called her beautiful before. "I'm not beautiful." She protested for more time, although this time without conviction. Marty's eyes met hers as he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close until their bodies were touching. He held her eyes with his own. "Do you trust me, Amanda?" he asked softly. She looked at him in surprise. She stopped for a minute, considering the question. She didn't know anything about him, yet she had spent the night in his arms, making love to him. She had let a stranger have full access to her body. She touched his face tenderly and realized that yes, she did trust him. "Yes," she said softly, then stronger. "Yes, I do." He smiled. "Then trust me when I say you're beautiful." She smiled too. "Okay." They sat like that for a few minutes, just holding each other and looking into each other's eyes. It was like magic, like two people just drawn together for no reason at all. Then suddenly Amanda found herself lying on her back with Marty laying over her. The blanket was still covering him, the only thing between their bodies. Amanda suddenly giggled. "You know, I haven't known you even 24 hours yet, but for some reason when I'm around you I somehow keep ending up on my back." She wrapped her arms loosely around his neck. Marty laughed a hearty laugh, then kissed her softly as he moved the blanket off of him. He pushed her legs gently apart until he was resting between them. "You make that sound like a bad thing," he said almost in a groan. She smiled, tightening her hold on his neck as she pressed her body against his. "I never said that." She pulled his mouth to hers and claimed his mouth in a searing kiss. He moaned, returning the kiss. He felt her body accept him and groaned against her mouth. "Oh God, baby, you feel so good." That was the other thing he liked about her. She was the only woman he had ever been with that could take all of him. Amanda kissed him back, molding her body against his. Marty groaned into her mouth, almost giving in. He slowly took his mouth from hers, dropping light kisses all over her face and neck. She lay perfectly still as he tortured her body with his soft kisses. Marty kept his hands braced on either side of her as he touched her with just his mouth. "Please," she moaned softly. Marty looked up at her. Her eyes were closed, her hands clenched at her sides as she forced herself to hold her body still. She was breathing heavily. He smiled. Amanda's breaths were coming out in pants. "Talk to me, Amanda," he said harshly. "Ugh," she moaned as she opened her eyes. "What?" she asked, looking down at him. Marty chuckled. "Tell me about yourself?" Amanda moaned, clutching at the blanket beneath her. What do you want to know?" she asked again, breathing heavily. Marty suppressed a smile as he held her open. He was really enjoying this, although he had a feeling that she would pay him back big time later. "How old are you?" he asked nonchalantly. Amanda breathed heavily, trying to catch her breath. Oh, 26. She finally panted. "Your parents still alive?" Amanda didn't understand why he was asking her these questions now. She was so hot. She tried to focus her mind on his questions, but her body was making it difficult. "Yes," she whined. Marty chuckled softly as his warm breath brushed over her. "Are they still together?" he asked. Amanda flinched at the question, a flicker of pain crossing her features. "No," she admitted. "They divorced when I was 12. Marty nodded, sensing there was more to the story. "Who did you live with after that?" he asked, his tone careful. "My mom," she said, her voice wavering. "Until I turned 18, then I left." The way her voice dropped at the end sent a chill through him. "Why did you leave?" he asked, concern etching his features. Amanda's hands trembled as she avoided his gaze. Finally, she whispered, "Because of my stepfather." Marty stilled, his chest tightening. "What happened?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. She swallowed hard, her eyes filling with tears. He hurt me," she said softly, her voice breaking. "That night I knew I couldn't stay. I packed what I could and left while everyone was asleep." Marty's fist clenched, a wave of anger surging through him. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm for her sake. "Amanda," he said gently, pulling her into his arms. "I'm so sorry you went through that. You didn't deserve it." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she finally let the emotions she had buried for years pour out. "I've never told anyone," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I didn't think anyone would care." Marty stroked her hair gently, his voice steady and reassuring. "You didn't deserve to go through that alone. If I'd known you then, I would have done everything to protect you." Her sobs grew louder, and she clung to him as the pain of her past poured out. Marty held her tightly, whispering soothing words until her tears subsided. "You're safe now," he said softly, his voice filled with conviction. "I promise you, Amanda, you're safe with me." Marty's rage returned as he listened to her talk. He wanted to go back and kill the scumbag that had hurt her. He knew he didn't want to hear more, but she needed to get this out. "It's okay, baby," he whispered softly against her hair. "Let it out. No one will ever hurt you again. I won't let them." His voice was full of vehemence. Her watery eyes lifted to him in surprise. "How can you say that? You don't even know me." He tightened his arms around her. "I know enough to know that I have you in my life, and I'm not in any hurry to let you go." Her eyes shined with tears as he softly kissed each one away. Reaching up, she touched his cheek with her hand. "Marty, She wasn't sure what she wanted to say, but somehow she felt he knew. "Shh," he said, putting his finger on her lips, then replacing it with his own. The kiss was soft and tender. There was no passion in it. Just two sets of lips touching almost like a butterfly's kiss. She closed her eyes as he kissed each of her closed eyes as well as her wet cheeks. Marty watched her as she slowly relaxed, then fell asleep in his arms. Her body relaxed against him, breathing evened out. He slowly moved her out of his arms, laying her back on the bed, covering her with a blanket. He sat back watching her sleep for a minute with a smile on his face. "Who are you?" he asked softly as he brushed her hair off her face. "How have you come to be so important to me in such a short time?" She had. Somehow Amanda. Hell, he didn't even know her last name. All he knew was that somehow in the last 16 hours or so she had wormed her way into his life and into his heart. He wouldn't call it love. Not yet. He didn't believe in love at first sight. He did, however, know that he cared about her very deeply, and the thought of her leaving him left a huge hole in his chest. He watched her sleep for a few minutes, then carefully climbed out of the bed. He pulled on his jeans and shoes, then walked down to the office where he paid for an additional 2 days. He also called his mom to tell her that he was just outside Carson City and needed a break so he wouldn't be there in time for her birthday. He didn't mention Amanda except to say that he was bringing a friend with him. His mom was upset that he wouldn't be home in time for her birthday, but at the same time she knew her son and knew that once his mind was made up, there was no changing it. She told him she loved him and to be careful driving down and she would see him when he got there. Then they hung up. After he hung up, he looked at the phone for a minute, then came to a decision. He climbed into the car and drove out of the parking lot. Amanda opened her eyes to the smell of Chinese food and a can opening. She didn't know how long she had slept, but when she looked towards the open curtains, she saw that the sun was setting. She looked around the room and frowned. Marty was nowhere in sight. She climbed out of the bed, then walked over to the only small table in the room. She picked up the can of soda sitting next to one of the filled plates, taking a long drink. Then suddenly she felt strong arms wrap around her from behind and smiled. "Good evening," he said softly before he kissed her ear. She set the can down before turning in his arms. "Good evening," she said, smiling at him. His hair was wet from the shower and he had shaved down to his goatee. She ran her finger lightly over his smooth cheek, then replaced her finger with her mouth. Kissing him softly, Marty closed his eyes, moaning at the touch of her lips. He was tempted to drag her back to bed and keep her there for the next week. But just then her stomach grumbled, and he smiled. "Food first, fun later," he chuckled, pushing her away and holding her chair out to her. She smiled at him as she sat down. "This looks wonderful," she said, picking up her chopsticks and digging into the sweet and sour chicken. She moaned as she closed her eyes and chewed. He sat down across from her, watching her eat with enjoyment. Once he had his fill of her for the moment, he dug into his own plate. "When did you do this?" she asked, for scooping some chow mein onto her chopsticks. He swallowed the piece of teriyaki pork he had in his mouth and took a sip of his own soda before he answered her. "This afternoon while you were sleeping. I also got some bread and lunch meat and some ice for the cooler." She glanced over, noticing the red cooler sitting on the extra bed that hadn't been used. "I also paid us up till Thursday," he said, taking another bite. She looked at him in surprise. "But that's 3 days from now. What about your mother's birthday?" He shrugged as he sucked up a noodle of chow mein and chewed thoughtfully. "She is cool with it. I called her. I told her that I needed a break." She looked down at her plate. "I'm sorry." He looked at her. "For what?" She lifted her eyes to his. "For disturbing your life like this." Marty reached out, grasping her hand in his. "Are you sorry you met me? Are you sorry that I'm the one who picked you up last night?" She looked at him. "No, not at all. I'm very glad I met you. I'm very glad that it was you who picked me up." She squeezed his hand. "But—" He shook his head as he tightened his hand on hers slightly. "No buts. Don't ever say you are sorry for messing up my life. You are the best thing that has come into my life in a long time, Amanda."